Hello, welcome to the Node.js community benchmarking meeting for October 23rd, 2017. So far we have myself, Benedict, Peter, Hitesh, Udam, and Anil, as well as, I think, Hitesh, you said Jimmy was with you?
Yep, he's here.
Okay. We'll go through our standard agenda. The first up is on the stand-up, so we might as well go around. I'll start. So mostly what I've done since last time is, I'm just trying to think. I think I actually was pretty busy at Node Interactive and then recovering, so not too much. Have looked a little bit at some of the issues in terms of finishing off the addition of Node DCEIS, but that's about it. Benedict, how about you?
So I have a first version of the tooling benchmark ready. It's going through some internal process though, but it's already uploaded to GitHub. It's a part of the V8 project now.
Okay.
And I want to run you through this later.
Okay, sounds good. We have that on the agenda. Project will run us through later in the meeting. Sorry, just taking a few notes. Okay, Peter.
Yeah, I did not look into the benchmarks yet, the Node.js one. So Hitesh and I said we were going to look through, but I haven't had a chance yet.
Okay. Okay, Hitesh.
Same as Peter. I will reach out to Peter today, and I guess we'll try to figure out how to split that.
Let's go look for micro use, and feel free to correct my notes if I'm taking them incorrectly here. Hitesh, Jimmy.
So I haven't done anything yet, but I'm going to be assisting Hitesh with the looking at benchmarks.
Okay. And Udam.
Well, after coming back from the conference, I sent you an reply to that comment about my last pull request, which you said was not landing properly because of just too many commits.
Yep.
So I had just one question: should I combine them into one, or there are 22 commits on that pull request?
Yeah, no, I'd answered. Yeah, just squash it down to one. I think what's happening is one of the intervening commits is conflicting, whereas if you squash it, like the number of changes is much smaller, and so it won't conflict with what's there.
Okay. Okay.
Because at the end it says it can merge. It's just that I think the intervening commits mess it up.
Yeah, but yes, okay. So I'll take a look. And the second thing I've been working on is during our conference Anil and Suresh, we talked about adding the ghost benchmarking to our Node.js benchmarking setup.
Yeah.
Since we have an expertise, basically we try to run it here on Intel platform. So I opened the issue to track that progress.
Right. Okay. So you're going to start working on creating the scripts like you did for DCIS to add Ghost, right?
Yeah. It would be either me or Satvik from my team. He would be doing that.
Okay. Sounds good. Anil?
No, I think Uttam covered all the things.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
I would have a question to Peter, but I'm assuming he will cover later or so that he's supposed to lead the work to reduce the different micro benchmark, etc. And I just wanted to know the status.
Right. Okay. So I think Peter, did you mention you just haven't had time to look at it yet, but you will be?
Yeah, that's pretty much where it's at. I plan to look at it before the next meeting.
Okay. And Peter, if you plan to chalk out the work, hey, these are all the things, it might be good. We could let the different community guys chime in. So if you want to create a top level list, hey, these are the 1,000, 2,000 cases, guys, and anyone want to suggest, oh, these are useless or other things, we might open up for.
Yeah, one thing I thought about was, I mean, it's not going to be possible for, you know, 2 people or something to go through all of them in a lot of detail because there's so many. So if we do sort of a bit and then maybe like write a little bit of a guide or sort of prioritize a bit, and then other people can sort of pitch in and pick up a little bit of the work if that's the way to go forward.
So yeah, you are the lead there. Please think whatever the best, and we can try to see once you create high level thing if someone from Intel can also be the helper worker there.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Excellent. Okay, so our next agenda item, so actions, we didn't have any from last week, so that's good. So next thing is to go through the tagged open issues. So the first one was the one that Udom actually already mentioned, 159, which was to add Ghost as a workload. So I don't know, do you have anything more to say on that front?
No, but we are actively working on it. So hopefully we should see something similar. But related to, that's about that issue.
Okay, sounds good. The next one is survey questions, but what I'm going to suggest is we leave that to the end and spend what time we have left to go through and maybe close on that. So the next one is the status of Node Core benchmarks, which is 127. So let's just open that. Right, okay, so this is the one related to running the core benchmarks. I'm just looking to see if there's anything. There's nothing recent. I think we should basically figure out if we're done on this one and basically, because people are definitely interested in starting to use it. And I'm just going to chime in there saying, are we ready to announce the rest of the team? They can start using this, or is there any other testing feedback we should get? That one, I don't know if anybody else has any comments, but I think that's my understanding of the statuses. We just need to say, are we ready to, you know, basically unleash the rest of the team on using it?
So are we going to actively use this as part of the benchmarking?
The first step was that anybody who's running wants to run the micro benchmarks for changes they're making can run that, and to enable that, really what we just need to do now, I think, unless there's any more feedback we want, is to tell the collaborators that it's there, point them at the little bit of guidance that's documented in terms of how to use it, and then people will be using it going forward. If I think separately from that, like if Paul, is some of what Peter's looking at is if we come up with a subset that makes sense to run regularly, we might use a similar script. But first, we got to figure out what you can run at a reasonable interval and what numbers you can sort of grab at a reasonable number of numbers and chart and stuff like that.
Okay. Do you think there's one? At least I think there's one thing lacking is if someone does want to run these micro benchmarks on a machine, do they need to know? Would it be helpful if they know they're running on a particular machine hardware, a CPU? If there is something, let's say buffer API test case, and there's some processor feature instruction, something like that, or glibc version, or there is no such information right now with the machine. I mean, unless you go into the where you know where to go and get the information, but there's not really available that information.
Right. So what are you suggesting we try and better document it, or what's your suggestion?
Yeah, if you can, I don't know much about the documentation where I can go and update the documentation about the machine information, but I don't have all the machine details also. But that would be useful if someone does want to run it on a and
so
know.
Those were donated from Intel, right? So
I'm not talking about those particular machine. I believe those are used for the build infrastructure, but this is about the performance testing, right? Or is it the functional testing?
Those will be for when the micro benchmarks run, they run on the ones donated that you guys donated.
I see. Okay.
It's the Acme area, like all the other ones run on the other machine, which I think there was an issue somewhere, right, where I captured some of that.
Yeah, we were thinking that these machines be used for the performance testing.
Which one?
For the Acme and the Node.js, can we use these new machines for the performance testing, benchmarking purpose, instead of just a bit?
Yeah, I think the main thing is it would change the graphs that we currently have.
Yeah, that's why we said we will not use it.
Yeah.
But if you are starting something new, like other micro benchmarks, can we use any of them? My main concern is this machine information available of the machine. That's all.
Yeah, no. So that's two good points. Like when we start to run Ghost, I guess the thing is we can look to see that there's some extra stuff installed on the benchmarking data machine. Well, actually, even on the main machine. So anyway, as we do Ghost, that's probably worth thinking about. Should we actually, add that extra stuff to those new machines and have them run there instead? That could make good sense.
Okay. If you have any thoughts about it, maybe that open issue we have, we can start capturing while building on the scripts.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay. I have one more point to it.
Yeah.
The HTTP 2.0 is being, I think, developed, or they're working on. Should we approach them? Hey, do you have any simple or reasonable use case which we can add to the performance benchmarking? So anytime in future somebody make changes, etc., it being tested then.
Right. So I guess that
proactively approach them. Hey guys, find or create a case so we can add it to the benchmarking.
Yeah, you mean like a whole system type? That does make sense. Does somebody want to volunteer to do that?
I think first we can.
I've been talking to James about some of the memory copy issues he's seeing. So maybe I can take a look at that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So just, if he's the right person to ask to say, hey, do you have a whole system one, and prioritizing that would make some sense given that's just coming in. So.
Okay. I can take that on. Yeah.
Okay. So let me just take that as a note here.
I do have a question. What is the philosophy around benchmarking of experimental features?
I don't think we've had one. You're thinking like whether we should or shouldn't, or
like is it do feature owners think that it's ready to be put into a regular benchmarking cadence, or is it up to the feature owners? Because we haven't talked about the similar thing for NAPI, have we?
Yeah. Well, no, we haven't. If we could come up with one, I don't think there'd be any problem in actually doing that. Like for some of these bigger features, the challenges I see is one, finding the right benchmarks, and then two, the overall number, right? Like, so the micro benchmarks, we have a huge number of micro benchmarks, but they're hard to chart. For things like, HTTP or HTTP2, that's probably, and even NAPI, if we sort of totaled up those bigger features and had performance benchmarks for them, I think if we had the benchmark and we had a script to run, I don't think there'd be any problems running it.
Okay.
So I don't know that the experimental ones I'd put into a different category yet. It's if we could actually get, something that's applicable and we could do it, I would say go for it.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay.
Do we get a volunteer for the NAPI benchmarks?
Do we have what?
I was just checking that. Volunteer?
Yes, Hitesh, are you going to volunteer for that one?
I mean, I guess the first step is to define it. So
yeah, that's we'll take that over. We've got lots to do on the NAPI side. I think you're looking at one performance case. So if you come up with something that would be a good benchmark out of that, then we can think about it.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay, some discussion about. I just wanted to take a note about what was it? Good. And what was we were just discussing that I wanted to take a note on?
Looking at the HTTP2 test case.
Oh, okay. I'll talk to James about a possible HTTP2 test case.
And I think since we are on the same path, James also starting updating the Stream APIs, right? That is one of the charter going forward. So I think we should ask them proactively. Yes, there are thousands of benchmarks, but identify now some meaningful single-digit cases which can test those changes, and we add them as we go into the node benchmarking. So
Sure.
for all future work, we require with these guys who are making significant changes, identify few critical benchmarks which can be added. So all new good features, we take care of them going forward.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a good way to sort of drive the prioritization stuff. So can we also ask James for a smaller set of micro benchmarks would be good for streams, right?
Yeah.
So
Because I know Peter is trying to clean up the mess from the past. We just so for the all the future one, we proactively try to do a good job.
Yep. So okay. So how about I'll volunteer you, Udom, to ask since you're already talking to James.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'm going to say Michael / Hitesh will talk with NAPI team on potential benchmarks as well. Make sense? Okay. Okay, the next one was number 128, which is Benedict wanted to give us an update on, sorry, it's 138.
Yep.
138.
Okay, that should work. Okay, so the repository is now hosted on GitHub/v8/webtooling benchmark. It follows the V8 project, copyright, CLA, whatever. So it's just whenever you want to contribute to this, you basically need to go through the same process as you need to go for V8. And the benchmark was rewritten to fully use NPM and Webpack. So all of the dependencies, all of the tests are just managed as dependencies. So updating them or using a different version is just a matter of changing the version in package.json. This thing then either runs in Node or you can run it through Webpack, and that generates two bundles, one for the browser and one for various JavaScript shells. So I get it running in Firefox shell and Chakra core in D8 and JSC shell. So that should probably cover all shells. If you open it in a browser, then it has this not very entertaining UI. But maybe I will find someone who makes it nice at some point. So from the tests, it's a fairly simple setup. I think I cover most of the tools that I use, since we don't want to measure I/O, or it doesn't really make sense to measure I/O, since we cannot do anything about it. It's only about the core workloads. So for example, in case of Webpack, there are two things that consume most of the CPU time. One is the parsing and one is the bundling and the actual tree shaking. The parsing is done via the Acorn parser. That's why Acorn is included. And for the tree shaking, I'm still waiting on the Webpack folks to come up with the separate benchmark for that. There's some trouble because of Webpack.
Do you have a mapping somewhere? Like you're saying that this
Yes.
is because of Webpack, so that's somewhere in there as well.
So you can click on all of them, and that should actually. Oh yeah, the link is broken. Okay, in theory it works, but it seems like I broke the links. There's this document where all the tools are described and the reason why they're included and what is actually tested.
Excellent.
So from the organizational point of view, all of this is in source. So let's say the Acorn benchmark. This is just loading Acorn. and then reading various source files. If you bundle this via Webpack, then all of this ends up in a virtual file system. Otherwise, if you run it via Node directly, then it loads it from the file system, and then this thing just runs the Acorn tokenizer on it and the parser, and in the end does a full AST walk. So that's mostly straightforward. What's important is we measure only the actual workload. We don't measure the I/O, so all of this reading of files happens before. So some of these benchmarks are more involved. Some of them are even simpler, like the TypeScript one is the simplest. It's just 2 files, or even 1 file, but compiled to ES3 or to ESNext via TypeScript. Yeah. So far, we don't validate the result, which I think we still need to do, although it's probably very hard for an engine to cheat on this. Plus, this is not really meant to be used for that, but yeah. I will add some verification at some point. I'm also tracking the...
So what do you mean by verification? That you actually get the right answer?
Right.
Right, okay. Yep.
Although if an engine manages to compile away TypeScript transpile module, then maybe it's fine. Whatever. Okay. So I'm also tracking findings on these benchmarks. We have this investigation document for V8. It already found a couple of things. Like I already addressed 5 tricky bugs that were found by the benchmark, and we just basically started looking. So I already see that we have a lot of interesting things that we can fix that didn't show up so far, or that only shows up now because we run certain things for a longer time. Well, so far we were mostly looking at startup in the browser, and there you don't see a lot. Yeah, so I said this is currently blocking on internal process. So we are not making public noise about it yet, and we probably, since this is mostly about improving performance of tools, we might want to not turn, so definitely don't want to turn this into the new Octane benchmark. This will be just one driver for performance, but not the main driver, definitely. Yeah, and that's it from me.
Okay, so how close do you think it is to, like, when we'll want to start running it nightly?
So I was already trying to set it up on our internal infrastructure, but I'm a bit worried that adding more tests still would change the number significantly. Plus, we have one major blocker, which is the missing predictable mode. So a mode where you can say, okay, you need to run for 20 iterations, all tests for 20 iterations, so that you get reproducible results. Because currently benchmark.js is used, and that will just run until it thinks that it has statistically significant data. But this is pretty bad,
right,
for continuously running it. So I'm waiting for Microsoft, or actually for John David Doughton, to provide this functionality. I hope he will do it soon. So, and I'm also waiting for Facebook. They want to send me another tooling case that is missing, and for Webpack that would be nice to include. So maybe 2 weeks. Maybe in 2 weeks we get something that we can start.
So it's getting close, but still wait a little while before we look at running it regularly.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Any other questions?
So if you know anything that's missing from there, so there are a couple of things that I couldn't include, like for example Rollup, which is a very popular bundler because it only provides promise APIs. And yeah, I talked to Rich Harris about it, and he was like, yeah, it would be nice to also expose the tree shaker, but he doesn't have time. So some tools are missing because there are no proper APIs. ESLint is also missing because it tries to it doesn't work with the Webpack bundle because it tries to do terrible things with npm. It hacks into the module system for reasons that are beyond me. That's why we only have the parser. ESPre is the parser, but we don't have ESLint itself.
Okay. Any other questions from people before we move on? No? Okay. Thanks for the update. And I guess maybe next we get back together, I think actually in a couple weeks, although we can talk about that. That's conflicts with NodeConf.eu, so we'll have to talk about that one. So the last issue we had, which was the survey questions on what to decide, to ask users on what to decide to benchmark. So that's number 136. There haven't been too many comments recently. Matteo had a few comments. I'm not sure that the how do async awaits stack up against callbacks is something that adds to our list. So I thought maybe we could, we have half the time left. We could spend, a certain amount of time now just discussing among the group we have here to see if we can refine the list at all.
I think Matteo's question is good. I'm hearing that question a lot, actually. In general, promise-based APIs versus callback-based APIs.
Right. So it is a good question, but it's not a question necessarily we're going to go and ask users, is it?
I think the main question for users is, given the choice of both, and both have similar performance, what would you prefer? And why?
Right.
So if people would prefer callback APIs, which I doubt, but that's just my gut feeling, then it doesn't really make sense to go all in on promise-based APIs.
Right. So it'd basically be if you have which kind of API do you prefer? Async await or callback?
We already covered that in this is the fourth question on my list. What's your preferred
Right,
way
yeah,
to
okay.
write
You've
async
already
code?
got that. Okay, so that's covered.
I'm not sure Matteo wants to get more out of this, and since he's on his own wedding, so we probably don't get an answer today.
Yeah.
Or anytime soon, maybe in node.conf.eu.
Yeah. Yeah, we can ask him there. Did you get a chance to look at the earlier survey? Does it cover any of these questions?
Yes, I think I started reading it. But to be honest, this is probably a month ago, so I don't really remember exactly what it was about.
Yeah, let's see. I'm just opening it up to see what we got there. Future development languages.
Oh, yeah, right. So I... Yeah. So I saw another survey. I think last time we already talked about that, or 4 weeks ago. And this survey was kind of biased towards backend developers, whereas on the other surveys, it was more the same. This is 70% backend and only 50% front end.
Right.
And I think there was some reasoning behind it, is that many people who do front-end development don't even know that they use Node.js all the time.
Right. It's just hidden behind the tooling.
Yeah, it's just you open Visual Studio Code and you're already running Node by doing that.
So again, I guess in terms of the questions that you had, do any of those previous surveys affect, like they haven't necessarily answered the questions, or have they? And then, you know, do we want to put together any other questions before we pass it on to the community to see if we can get that to go out and get the feedback?
So I don't really think I have seen answers to this. So I think the first one, yes, but this, what's your primary use case?
I think that's still good for context, though. Yeah.
Right. To get the proper context and put everything into perspective that comes afterwards. But specifically the language dialect and the optimization passes would be interesting.
Yep.
I've now looked at so many things on NPM, and there's no. I still cannot grab an underlying concept. Some people bundle their code and minify it and whatnot, and then upload it to NPM. And some people just pass the naked year 6 code that they write. So that might be interesting to get an idea or get a sense of what people do and why they do it.
Right. So I guess I'm looking through the questions. One I might add, I see the last one, which is if you could choose which JavaScript language feature should be optimized next, what would it be? I think we could add if you could choose which Node.js language feature should be optimized next, what would that be?
So do you think people are able to tell the difference between a JavaScript language feature and a Node.js feature?
Well, can we add something to separate those out?
I think we probably have to separate them out in the answers. Like once we get the answer and somebody says which JavaScript feature you want to optimize in the answer buffer, well, we'll have to.
I guess I was more worried that some people who do might read that and not think about Node things versus JavaScript.
Yeah. So I'm also, I think many people would already respond with buffer here. But yeah.
Or should we, we could put which JavaScript language / Node.js feature?
Yeah, that would be okay.
Just want to make sure that it doesn't, because it would be good to have either, right?
So even if you have, yes, I agree. But even if you only point to a JavaScript language feature, let's say people need faster promises, faster async wait, then that also depends on Node because the microtest queue goes together with Node. So
right.
I think you don't need to draw a clear boundary here. So maybe just what you suggested at /Node.js.
Right. Okay. So if you could choose which JavaScript language / Node.js feature should be optimized next. Okay. So should I edit that in the?
Yep. Please do so.
Okay. So I'll edit that in your list there directly. JavaScript. So does anybody have any other ideas? Node.js.
Is it worth asking about the tools that people use today to investigate the performance issues?
I think that's a good one.
That's a good one, especially since we figured out that we broke most of the existing Node tools recently. Yeah, specifically Linux Perf, for example. If people use that, then we better get that running again.
Okay,
yeah.
So that was broken.
It's broken because Linux Perf doesn't understand anything about our interpreter bytecode handlers.
Ah, that makes
obviously.
sense.
So
yep.
you only get ticks in the bytecode handlers now, but you don't have an idea to which function the ticks belong.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of important.
Yeah. So if that is super important and used by people, then we should fix it, or we should have tests on the Node side that it still works.
Yes. Yeah, okay. So what tools do you use to investigate performance issues? Would there be good to have a generic one just about which Node features do you think affects your performance the most?
Yeah, that's also, we asked that in our survey and people were so off, or no, the DevRels had a survey running this, yeah. And people were really confused about what adds to performance.
Okay.
So yeah, always include that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, so I've updated it here. Actually, I should let me share my screen so you guys can see what I'm doing here.
Oh, we have the reload button.
Yeah. Oops. Nope. Okay, forget that. That was too much. A window. I think it's this guy. There you go. Okay, so I've added a couple. Any others?
Can there be any question about, let's say, if there is we are working on HTTP2, for example, in Node Core. This feature is available, or it will be available, or something similar in future. Can the survey has a question about some feature which is in works?
Sure, we can ask whatever we want.
Oh yeah, what about workers? Sorry.
Yeah. So for example, so people might just start to know the feature before even available and what it is good or where it can be used. HTTP or worker also, or multi-threading, whatever happens to be. So we can have a question and have some new features which are in works right now, or people are thinking the core one we can add into the survey. Would that be helpful?
Yep.
Yeah, specifically on multi-threading front. So this blog post by Philip Pieslow gained a lot of traction about concurrent JS.
Sorry,
maybe
can you paste that? Do you have the link to that?
Was on the WebKit blog. I can.
Yeah. Okay, that was. I think it was where they were trying to introduce threading at the engine level, right?
So Philip has been working on this for a long time, for 4 years probably, or even concurrent JavaScript. Yeah. Here you go. Oh, yeah, look at this.
Yeah, okay. I think I read through that. That was an interesting one.
Yes.
So you think that question I added there is like, do you have use cases where you cannot use Node.js because it's single-threaded? Is that?
Yes, that's a good one, and maybe also adding to that. So, would workers solve the problem for you? And workers and message passing and shared array buffers.
Right.
One thing I think might be interesting to also understand is whether people have benchmarks for their own code. And the reasoning here is when we tell people to do testing of Node, new versions of Node, do they actually like catch performance regressions ahead of time, or are they going to be like, yep, looks good, and then later on they're like, oh, I see a slowdown because they don't have any benchmarking on their end?
Yeah. I think it's specifically about tracking performance then. Do you have infrastructure for tracking performance?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have infrastructure in place for on your applications? But do you know where, so how to report? I don't know. Do we want to ask that? I was thinking, like, do people know how and where to report performance regressions in their applications?
Most of the time it's Twitter nowadays.
I'm just thinking, like, do we actually want to make it easier for people to say, hey, the latest version seems to have regressed this or that?
So it's definitely better if people tell us, because then we at least know.
Right.
Whereas if they don't tell us, but then, complain later.
So how about this? Is that a reasonable question? Do you know how to report performance regressions when you upgrade Node.js versions?
So what would be the proper answer on your side?
That's a good question. I could be or maybe we should say, where do you report performance regressions that you see? Like, because I think today it would be the Node.js tracker. That's probably about it. Maybe
Yeah,
if we say,
I could imagine an outcome where if majority of the people say Twitter, then we document some process saying tweet at this handle or always include this hashtag, and then this working group, for example, could monitor that.
Yeah, that would be nice.
okay, so where do you report performance corrections if you see them when you upgrade Node.js versions? Does this one, so would a worker model where additional threads are available but data is exchanged as as messages
Or shared array buffers.
messages or shared, say that again,
yeah, shared mutable state via shared array buffers.
that seem reasonable?
Yep.
Okay. What else?
One thing, the sentiment behind the survey seems to be around throughput, and I've heard a lot of customers complain about memory, and so I think it'd be interesting to just see what the perception out there is, and so maybe ask a question of, do you think you have a performance problem do you have a CPU problem or a memory problem, and see what people say.
How about that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
You most often see when you encounter performance issues, are they most often due to CPU or memory? How about that?
I think it will be super hard to tell for anyone whether it's CPU or memory. I think this question is really hard to answer.
I would put it another way, actually, which is, I agree that it's hard to answer with any kind of depth, but I think it's more trying to measure the perception of the community here. And one other way I would frame it is if they could ask the node core to invest in one area, would it be CPU performance improvements or memory improvements?
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
So okay.
Would it be worth also in an additional thing or a separate question to do with startup time? If there's people running a lot of short-lived things, but a lot of them, especially in a dev tooling environment.
But in dev tool environment, you don't run short-living tasks, as I learned. So all of this is driven by usually by Webpack or Browserify or Rollup. So you have these 100 files, and you run Babel all the time, and it's already warmed up on the second file, for example. So I'm not sure, is there really a use case where Node fires up a lot?
That's newly updated. If you had to choose one, would you want the Node.js community to improve CPU or memory efficiency?
Yeah.
Sorry, and I missed what was the other thing you were just discussing?
Excuse me. I was wondering if it's worth investigating, asking people what their perception of like startup time or latency between doing a command and getting a result, and if that's worth looking into.
Right. So I think startup is important, but I guess confirming, is startup time important to you? Is that what you wanted to suggest?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay. Yeah, we've assumed it is, but it'd be good to actually have data that says yes.
Yeah. So what about latency? Specifically Jank, is that a problem on a node side or a visible problem?
So you mean from a GC perspective, like GC pauses?
GC pauses, compiler pauses, whatever pauses. So anything that introduces Jank.
So what do you want to say is
Jank a problem for your use case?
How do you say that?
Low latency or
varying latency?
I don't know.
Really.
It's not really latency. Yeah.
caused by GC by the garbage collector or
the optimizer.
Optimizer cause problems for your application. That makes sense?
Yeah, you use cause twice now. Do pauses introduced by GC or something like that, maybe?
Introduced. Or just garbage collector pauses, or how about that? But shorter is better. That.
Or optimizer pauses.
These are good. Any other ideas?
How about the Node.js usages? For example, what are the command line options people are familiar with? I mean, there are just tons of command line options with Node and V8, debugger options, tracing options, GC tracking options. How familiar are they with all those options they can do to collect various performance data? I don't know how to phrase it. It just looks like a long question, but
I think we already have this question. What do you do if you run into a performance issue? So maybe that is...
where is that one?
What tools is the first one in that section?
Right, what tools do you use to make... Okay, right.
So you can extend that question.
Tools is like an external tool, but what about the features supported by the node itself? Is that the same as tools?
I just added to that one, what command line options. So it says, what tools do you use to investigate performance issues? What command line options do you use?
Okay.
That sort of maybe prompts them to think about the ones you just suggested.
Okay.
So I also think we need to keep the list reasonably long. So if it's more than 10 questions, then people don't tend to answer the last questions probably.
Right. I was thinking about like ordering. Do we have a logical ordering in terms of asking these?
Yeah, I think we need to start with the use case. So this is just so that everything else is in context. And yeah, I would really love to see some answers on the dialect and the deployed code. For the rest, I don't really know what would be a good ordering. Maybe put the top 5 node modules last. So the second last question, make that the last one, because that's easy to answer even if you're already went through 9 questions.
Right, sure.
So maybe put also bump the priority of the where do you report performance regressions.
Okay.
Like move that up.
The drag and drop doesn't work too well.
Unsurprising.
Okay.
No, I mean bump it up. So basically put it right after the optimization passes.
Right.
So
okay.
third question.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Okay.
And then also this. Where was this fancy question? What was the next feature we should optimize?
Yes, that
Where's
was.
this question? Oh
right,
yeah,
this
here.
one.
Yeah, make that. It's already second last. That's fine. Okay. leave it there.
Sure.
Because if that comes too early, then people will just come up with all kinds of crazy ideas.
Right.
And there was this other question, if you had to choose what to focus on. This is also one of these never-ending questions. So even note CPU or memory. I think that should also be moved down.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
This one I could see going up too.
Yeah. This.
Like it's fairly straightforward and like say there, right?
Yep. Maybe even further. So maybe make that a second question. Because this is super important if we get
right. It sort of like tells
answers.
You how interested they are in performance or not.
Yep.
Although
yeah, maybe change the order of these two. So first ask what affects performance the most, and then ask what tools you use. Yeah, I think by now we have a proper ordering even. Yeah, the stuff that belongs together is together.
Okay, so is that? Do you think that's too many? A reasonable number?
Oh, let's go. Yeah, it's quite long. So we don't do bullet points. We just do we don't do multiple choice, but we have text fields then.
Yeah, I don't. Are there any of these that multiple choice makes sense?
You could add them, but it's better if people really write down what they want.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to make that as a note on front. These should be text entry to leave the answers open, right?
Okay, I have to find a power plug. But to me, this list looks good.
Okay.
So Peter, what do you think? Anything you can think of?
Seems pretty good to me. I think yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, I think that would certainly, if we got the answers to a bunch of those, it would be quite good in terms of prioritizing different things. And okay, so I'm going to take this list. So I'm going to go over to the ComCom community, GitHub, and we'll open an issue. New issue. Benchmarking. Request for survey. Sorry, the benchmarking team would like to request help send me a survey. The first draft is okay. Open. Send out. So I've just added that to the issue. I opened one in the ComCom committee. That's tacky. So I had talked to Tracy, the community manager, earlier about this. She seemed interested in that, and generally they'd like to to actually, send out more surveys, get customer feedback, and sort of formalize almost a little bit how to make that easy to happen. So when I talked to her, she sounded very receptive to help me out, maybe using this as the first test case. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that would be nice. Looks good.
Yep. Okay. So we can just keep track on that issue to see what goes on. But I'm gonna I didn't mean to close that one. I'm gonna reopen it, and we'll see there. Okay. So we're just at time. Was there anything else people wanted to discuss this week? I guess the last thing we should do is that the meeting conflicts with NodeConf EU, so I wouldn't be able to make it.
So you're at NodeConf EU?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else is. If one of you guys, if somebody else wants to volunteer to run the meeting, you could have it next week anyway.
No, I will be there too, and Peter is also there.
Yeah, I'll be there as well.
Okay. Okay, so do you want to push it out for 2 weeks? I'm actually away though next week because I'm taking a little extra holiday. So do you want to just push it out so that our next meeting is a month from now?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so we will say that it is November 20th. Okay, great. So we'll talk to you guys all then.
All right.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.